to our show. I'm AJ Dean with Film Talk with AJ Dean, and I have the amazing and wonderful co-host from Las Vegas, Nevada, Paul Vato with me. Hi, Paul. How are you this week? How's it going?
Oh, I'm wonderful. Thank you. It's started really warming up in Las Vegas. Sorry for those of you that are still suffering with winter and snow. I mean, winter is officially over, but I've actually have to turn the heater off in my home. And I'm like, ooh, I think the AC is going to be coming on pretty soon. So the temperatures become very nice. And of course, March Madness is in Vegas. So it's always busy this time of year. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to this interview.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like things are heating up there in Las Vegas. So speaking of hot things, we have a hot guest in the building. We have a very special VIP guest. We have the Angel in the building, and I want to give a very warm and heartfelt welcome to her. She is a film and TV composer, producer, and record producer, and we have a lot of wonderful things to talk about. Welcome, the Angel. How are you? So happy you are here with us.
Thank you so much, AJ and Paul. So nice to see you guys. You know, I know the voices so well, but this is a big deal. We finally get to see each other.
Yes, and you're even more beautiful than your photo on a Clubhouse. And I want everybody to sit back and enjoy an incredible interview tonight. I want to get right in on it. The Angel, I'm so excited. We have this beautiful movie poster called The Boiler Room. It's a blockbuster film. And we also have a beautiful picture of you in like a setting of a stage recording session. Could you share with us what that is, describe it to us, and tell us what it was like to be a composer for that film?
Sure. So Boiler Room was the first film that I scored in its entirety. I had done some additional composing on a film called Gridlocked, which is actually that poster with Tupac and Tim Roth. It was one of Tupac's very last films, unfortunately. And that's where, on that film, I actually learned all of the politics of what it takes to actually get hired on a studio feature as a composer, and especially as a first timer, because creatively they wanted me on that film. And Polygram, who was the studio at the time, said, no way, you can't hire a first timer. And so they went away and they hired Stuart Copeland to score Gridlocked. And then they came back to me when I thought it was really gone. They came back to me about 3 weeks later and said, you know what, we really want your flavor on this. How can we make this happen? You know, Stuart's our composer now, but would you work with him? Like, what would you suggest? And I said, well, I have a lot of respect for Stuart, but if you want what I do, then you're going to have to let me work separately, because what I do, like the mad professor that I am, I just create it all by myself, which actually goes to my process and really, just so we get this out of the way, I write, arrange, program, engineer, mix. I do it all. So there isn't this like sort of team behind me, or like, something behind the curtain. When people hire me, they get me. And so when I say that, if you want me to collaborate, sure, but you'll get something different. And so they said, no, we'll separate the cues. And that was how I sort of cut my teeth. And there was another film I did a little additional composing on called Till There Was You. But it was Boiler Room that really was my first full studio feature that I scored in its entirety. And that was because Ben Younger, the director, was very, very specific about what he wanted. He did not want traditional score. I come from record producing, and what I produce as a record producer and recording artist, it's very underground, down tempo, cool kind of melange of, a mixture of soul and jazz and funk and hip hop and dub and reggae. So it was, what I was doing was always very, very much its own thing. And it caught the ear of Vondi Curtis Hall on Gridlocked, and it also caught the ear of New Line and Ben Younger, and they'd actually asked Ben to meet with literally every usual suspect composer in LA at the time, all men, to see if they would, if he would hire them to score the film. And he was really adamant that he wanted someone who understood that in the world of his characters, which is all about the scammy end of stock brokerage firms, that he'd worked in a boiler room. That's where the name comes from. So he was writing about his own experiences, and he and all of his buddies listened to hip hop. That was what they were into. And so he felt that his characters, that's what the film needed. And it wasn't an obvious choice, but this was organic to the story. So when they finally said, hey, would you meet with the angel? He was just like, okay, so what are you listening to? And he like took out a stack of CDs and said, what about this? What about that? We were just going back and forth about all the various different artists that we both loved and listened to. And he's like, yeah, you totally get me. You get it. And that's how I wound up scoring that film. But, he really wanted scratching and cues. He wanted everything to feel very much so that the score and the source music, which is all the licensed music, all the songs, and there's some brilliant 90s hip hop in that film. He wanted it to be seamless so that you didn't get taken out by the score and then back in with the source. And often films will be scored that way. So he took a really creative approach to keeping it, to keeping the score very much in the world of his characters. And I think that was a really brave choice, and it made a lot of sense. Creatively, it made total sense. So that was a really fun project. I mean, I was able to bring in like horn sections and guitarists and all kinds of different live instrumentation, and then have to distress it so that it sounded like samples, because there's no sampling, so that's a big no-no. But the sound of all those records that he loved so much are full of samples, because that is the sound of the golden era of 90s hip hop. So, I'd have to go through this whole rigmarole of like recording it down, distressing it, and then making it feel like it was just of that whole sound.
Wow, what you do is so very special and unique, the angel. And like you said, you do so many things. You wear so many hats. That's amazing. I think you're a rarity, and I think you're a gem. And I love that it was based with hip hop, and it came from his own story. So important and so authentic that you created that music and supported him that way. The picture that you're sitting that's on the screen right now, this is an incredible photo. There's a movie screen, film screen behind you, and then several film screen bays and a couple technicians or team members there. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. So that shot, rarely will we actually have somebody come in and take photos when we're working on the dub stage. And the dub stage is the studio in which all of the audio gets mixed for the final mix of a film or a television episode. This happens to be from a television episode of a show called Hawthorne, starring Jada Pinkett Smith. I was hired to score this series by Glenn Mazzara, who's a phenomenal showrunner and a super cool, right-on person in the industry. So what you're looking at behind me is the mixing desk, and these are the two re-recording mixers actually doing the mix. When I'm in my studio, I'm sitting in that position and I'm doing all of that stuff. But when we're doing these projects, I'm not sitting at the mixing board. I'm sitting back where next to me would be the producers. In television, it's generally the executive producers, and sometimes people from the studio will come down to the network to also have a listen, to play what we call playback. Once the mix is kind of really close to being signed off, then they come in to also have a listen. And if everyone has notes, you go through it, first frame to last frame, and people have notes about a little bit of dialogue might be getting lost, or something in the score might be like sticking out a bit too much, or there's a sound effect that's missing, or they want a bit more, they want to fill it more, you know, with other sounds, so ambient sounds. So there's a lot of things that go on to finish a final mix of a project, whether it's film or TV. And that's what we're doing there. There's
I love this. I love this photo because it's right. You take us right in at that moment when action is happening. It's very exciting, and you look gorgeous in it, and it just captures the moment in time. It's so special. And I love that. So what was it like working with Ben Younger? You mentioned a little bit about it with him. Was it fun? That was a fun experience, right?
We had a blast. I mean, you know, this is the thing about being a composer that I really love. Working closely with my directors in film, because film is director's medium. Television is much more producer's medium. And so whoever I'm working with, you know, I'm very tactile. So I really enjoy the process of, you know, really understanding exactly what they want and understanding the credibility of the music that Ben was seeking was really of great importance. And so going through the whole process with him was really fun, and it was creative, and we really built up a great rapport. I mean, to the point where he had to actually do some reshoots for the end of the film. And because the way that he originally wrote it, it was a lot more kind of intense at the end. And there was something that New Line felt a little uncomfortable about once they looked at the final cut. So they actually had him rewrite an extra scene at the end. And I remember him, it was like the first time this has ever happened, but he shared those script pages with me. He said, "What do you think of this?" And it always stayed with me because, you know, I wasn't that experienced at that point. And so it was really nice to be trusted enough with that kind of, you know, with that question. But he knew how much I loved the film and how much I believed in it. And I think that also made for really good dialogue between us. And the film, to this day, when people find out that I scored it, anyone who's in sales or, you know, because there's like a real famous scene from the film with Ben Affleck really giving the entire team a fantastic monologue about sales. Is very kind of Wall Street, you know, Wall Street for the 90s. This was for the new millennium at that point. So it was, yeah, it's got its charm for that era.
I loved that. I loved that film. Didn't you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, because I remember in the 1900s when I would get calls from the boiler room people, because I was in business for myself, and it was always endless. And sometimes I would humor them and stay on the phone for a while. Right. But I was always fascinated by that world of, you know, where are these people, like New York, New Jersey. It was kind of that whole Wolf of Wall Street thing where you know, they're calling and they're telling you to invest your money and this and that. And you know, it was, and if I was busy with customers, I'd be like, "Hey, I got it." And I almost knew them, like, I gotta go. You know, I've actually got customers to help. But then sometimes you'd sit there and BS with them. But I was always fascinated by that. So when this movie came out, I remember thinking like, "Oh my goodness, this is," you could relate to it. And it was that scamminess that was going on with the penny stocks and all that. And you know, what an amazing film to have worked with, and then to have scored the whole project. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was it was a fantastic thing to really cut my teeth on. You know, it was because also we were doing something that hadn't really been done before, and it was really, and it fit. You know, when people tend to think about film score, they always have a very narrow view of what that means. And to me, what it really is about is what is the world that we're being taken into, and how does the score sit nicely into and enhance that world rather than sit on top and tell you something else. it should be living in the film rather than being this other element that takes your ear and takes you out. So yeah, it was really a fun project and something I still feel I love to this day. So.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, and it's amazing. And I don't know how to maybe say this correctly, but I feel it's like one of those things where when it's done well and perfectly, like you've done it, you don't necessarily go like, oh, that was brilliant. It just makes the whole film and experience brilliant. Whereas I think like, and maybe that's it. If you just set something on top of the film, it'll take you out of the world maybe without even knowing it. And you're just like, something didn't work. But I think for us that can't, they're not in that world, we don't see it. We just know that it didn't work. But then when it works, you're probably not going like, you know what, it was the score. I mean, it almost feels thankless, I think, unless it's the person that actually understands scores and music and can appreciate it that much. Am I way off or?
No, you're right on. I mean, the truth is that you shouldn't be kind of totally conscious of the score. What it should do is just, it should just be there, as part, like all it should be doing is supporting performances, supporting what's going on visually. It really is playing a supporting role, unless, for instance, in an opening scene, and it's a big opening on this, it's a lot more present, and where there's no dialogue, or where it's a big montage sequence and you just want to be hearing the music because it's driving the scene. That's a whole other thing. But 90% of composing, you're sitting under dialogue, and that's okay. I don't write a bunch of music, output it, and hand stems over to a music editor. That is, a valid way to do it, and every composer works differently. But I work to picture, so I'm literally looking at every micro expression, every little something that happens on screen, so I can nuance something around it. And it's not like, in television, it's all about hitting something. It's like, there's a gun, hit the gun with something. I'm like, okay, I'll hit the gun with something just in case it goes invisible and nobody sees it. But, I'm just being silly. But, it's the truth is, that's a very specific thing that is done often in television. And you could be a little bit more subtle, I think, most of the time in film. And so it's more about nuancing things, and that's my process. I really love working to picture. It's I've written and recorded and released so much music, so tons of records, but the skill set that I bring to my composing is completely different. And the thing that I love the most about it is that sort of like me and the picture. That's where the magic happens for me, and for
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, wow. I wish we could go on for 3.5 hours instead of just 35 minutes or thereabouts, because I have so many questions, and it's sometimes it's usually of things that I don't know much about, and so excuse my ignorance when it comes to music and scoring. An integral part. But you mentioned, and I've heard this before, and I know that we could just probably look it up, but could you quickly? So I have two questions, but could you quickly cover what are stems? Because I see that written in bios, and then I'm like, oh, I got to look that up, and then I don't. So if you could maybe quickly address the word stems when it comes to music, I would appreciate that.
Yes. So stems are, when we're mixing the whole piece of music, and it's made up of lots of different instrumentation. So there could be drums and bass and guitars and pianos and strings and horns and a million other things. And when we stem out the music, we are separating, we're soloing each grouping of instrumentation, so that you could literally play just the strings, just the bass, just the drums, just any of those things. And that means that it can be sort of rejiggled on the dub stage to rebalance it. I'd say 99.9% of the time, nobody touches my stems, because I mix to picture. I mean, I'm kind of an oddball in this regard, but I actually don't just mix. I will mix under dialogue. So I'm sculpting so that nothing has to be touched when it gets to the dub stage. Some people just hand over, as I say, like a ton of these stems, give it to a music editor, have them cut it in and create all the movement, which is, you know, it is what it is. I would never work that way. When I deliver to the dub stage, I know exactly where everything is going. I mean, everything is also, it's time stamped. So that means that when I output it from my Pro Tools session, it jumps straight into the Pro Tools session of both my music editor and then the mixers on the stage. So there's not even a question of like, oh, where does this go? No, it just pops straight into where it needs to go, and it fades in and it fades out, and it's very complete. Again, not everybody works that way, but the stems, yes, that I hope I explained.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it's literally stems, little pieces.
It's just, well, it's the length of every, you know, like let's say this is the whole length. Okay, this is the length of the piece, then every stem is the same length, even if it just only does a little something here and then it drops out, and then they just line up. So when you line them up and you play them all together, you get the full sound of the stereo mix. But the way that I output things, generally people there's no need to touch it.
It sounds like you're the person I'd want to work with. Like, yeah, give me the finished product. Don't let me figure it out, or now have to hire someone else to figure it out.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, I would never. I feel like it's not even the full job when you hand it over to and music editors are very adept at cutting music in this way, and that's how they temp. Also, when temping is a process of putting temporary music in there before the composer's even involved, so that all the producers and all the executives can actually listen to and watch hopefully as they're getting toward a rough, like a locked cut, which is when you stop editing. So as they're watching rough cuts, it helps them to be able to watch it, like to watch a film dry or to watch an episode of TV completely dry is very hard to judge for most people. Even very experienced people in the industry. So it helps them to be able to hear some kind of music. And when the composer's not been hired yet or is not on board yet, because really we come in, we're the last one in after everything's locked. So, you know, in order for them to really be able to judge how the cut is feeling and are they feeling all the right things, they temp it. And all of that music, no matter how much they start to love it and get used to it, has to go. It all has to be replaced by the composer. And also even some of the songs that they temp in, often they may not be able to afford them. The budget may not, you know, be big enough, even on a big movie, to afford every piece of music that they want to license. So yeah, there's a lot to be.
It's so funny because I have a friend who's been working on his own film, you know, for bootstrapping it himself. And he had a cut of his film, the last Angry Brown Beret, and a friend wanted to see it. He's like, well, it's not ready. You know, it still needs, you know, music and the score and things. And the guy's like, he goes, I can look at it with an objective eye. Send it. So he sends it. He watches it, and then he screens it in front of people at the Egyptian with the score. And the guy goes, this cut is so much better than the one you sent me. Yeah. And my friend goes, I haven't changed a thing. I just added the score that I wish I could afford for the film. But and the guy's like, he goes, no, he goes, you re-edit, total re-edit. He goes, absolutely not. He goes, it's the exact same. So that just shows you the importance of what you guys do and to do it well. So I mean, it's crazy. And then I wanted to just a quick question on Gridlocked.
Yes.
So it sounds like then you ended up working with another composer, and then somebody else put it kind of together, or you kind of did your own thing, and then Copeland did his thing, or how did that work with? Because like you said, you want to work on your own, or did you end up doing most of that project?
No. Stuart wound up being hired as the main composer, and I was hired to. What they decided to do was because I said, look, rather than us working together, if you want that flavor, just give me whatever cues you want. And so they gave me like, not that many, maybe 6 cues or something like
Okay.
that. But they were specific areas in the film. There's a great scene where Vondi Curtis Hall, who wrote and directed the film, he also plays the gangster in there. And Tim Roth and Tupac are junkies and they're trying to kick heroin. So that's the premise. And Tim Roth is trying to sell a box that looks like it's a camcorder back in the day, but it was actually full of bricks. And so, Vondi pulls up in his car, and he puts the window down, and Tim Roth is trying to scam him basically. And what they wanted me to do for that particular scene was to take Superfly, Curtis Mayfield track, and do a version of it, and what we call scoring. So it's scored and it's hitting action in the scene, but it's also built off of something that's source, that might have played as source, because, and if they'd just gone with the original song, it wouldn't have hit everything that it needed to do. And so I wound up reinventing Superfly for that scene, and it's really fun because the tone of the film is not very heavy. It's not, it's heavy subject matter, but it's not tonally heavy in that way and dramatic in that way, but it is a drama. So that was just like another fun little about.
Now, does that mean that you used Superfly, or used like Superfly as an influence, and now it's an original piece that fits hitting those spots, or is like Superfly listed on the album? I guess is my question.
No, well, no. And that's a great question. So in this particular instance, it was not like a remake. It was not a remix of the original or anything like that. It was just using it as inspiration, as you said. And in fact, I did so much original recording in it. I added so much and changed so much about it that they actually, and I really, really appreciate the Curtis Mayfield family, because when we'd asked about it from a publishing standpoint, they said, yeah, we will give you a piece of the publishing because you've written so much original music around this, even though it's based on and it's inspired by, which I just thought was incredibly decent and fair. And honestly, that is so not the way things work in our industry. So I just, I'm always happy to say how much I really love and respect that family and whoever is in control of the estate. Curtis was an amazing talent.
Wow, thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. I love this. This is such a great show. Thank you so much, Paul, for that. I'm learning so much, and there's so many different intricacies and details. I mean, there's a lot to this, and it's really amazing. And thank you so much, Angel, for that. I want to switch it up a little bit and talk about women in the industry. Women only represent 6% of all film and TV composers worldwide. Wow. So The Angel, how have you been able to navigate through this and be so successful?
Well, thank you for that question. It's interesting. I didn't come up the normal way in the industry, in this part of the industry. Everything I've done has been completely self-motivated, self-taught, everything. So, the fact that I was able to make my own records, sign a deal with an LA-based record company called Delicious Vinyl, build a lot of credibility as a producer, a remixer, and building a sound that caught the ear of some of these filmmakers. That's what pulled me in. And the reason I go back to this is because, there are a lot of musicians that go to Berkeley and they learn, they go the traditional route. I've done absolutely nothing traditional in my entire career. Everything has just been like, I want to do this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to teach myself. And then I'm going to just see what happens. And so in doing that, it opened up doors. I didn't go looking, chasing this. It found me, which is pretty amazing. And so I think because I came at it that way and I didn't come up on, behind a bunch of guys, I mean, there's a whole side of the composing realm that people don't often talk about. And, and I think it's worth at least sharing this with you guys. And I know you're interested in this stuff. I'd say about 15 or 20 guys get all of the major gigs in this industry, film and TV wise. And a lot of them have these huge teams. And so they'll take 5 or 6 gigs at a time and they will sub them out to various factions. Sometimes they're kids out of Berkeley getting, firsthand experience, but no credit, and no writing, no publishing, no nothing. Sometimes they never come out from behind the curtain. Occasionally, some of them eventually get a shot at that after many years. It's so that's why a lot of the composing stays within a very concentrated small group, and it's a very old school and old boy network, and it's been around forever. I mean, when I've been hired to score, for instance, when I scored Standoff for Fox, which is a drama series, an FBI drama series for Fox, I was the second woman in 16 years to score a Fox primetime series.
Wow.
And that was back in 2006, 2007. I can guarantee you the stats haven't gotten much better since then. When I scored Hawthorne for, it was Sony produced it and it was for TNT. Sony couldn't remember doing another deal with a woman to score a series. They produced a lot of Lifetime movies that, some women got a shot at doing. But really, it's a
very male-dominated industry. Even in this picture here, Paul, we can see the two team members there are men, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's typical. It's I've gone out of my way, and I've done an Instagram post about it. Like I think the second to last one, if you have a look on my IG, I posted about something that Ava DuVernay hired me to score a pilot that she directed for CBS called For Justice. And Ava and I had started working together on her very first narrative feature. Unfortunately, by the time she locked picture and needed me to start, I'd already been hired to score Hawthorne. And that's a series, which means there's a lot of setup and a lot of prep I have to do before I really get in. And they pulled me in about 3 weeks early because they needed to rush the first couple of episodes to get it out to the press, to start getting reviews, to start hyping the new show. And so my window shut on that, which was a killer. I love that film. Her first film was very personal. It's called I Will Follow, and it's a beautiful film. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. So I couldn't, unlike a lot of my contemporaries, I don't sub out my gigs. When you hire me, you get me. So it broke my heart, but I just couldn't do both at the same time. And so years later, Ava came back to me and said, hey, would you do this? You know what I want, you know what I like. Pilots are insane. I will just say that. And so it was, it's the only time in my entire career that I've not spotted. And I will explain what spotting is, because I'm sure that most people don't understand that term. So I know, and I'll come back and answer your, how did I manage to, who knows really, but I will come back and try to answer your question. So when you finally get a locked picture and all that editing is done and they've taken rounds and rounds of notes, the production team, then the composer comes in, and that the meeting that we have, which determines like our roadmap for how we're going to score that project, whether it's film or television, is called a spotting session. And so we basically start at the very beginning, from the first frame to the last frame, and it's been temped, and we talked about what temping is. And we basically discuss every single piece of temp and every inch of the project, and discuss whether or not, like, do they even like the temp? Sometimes, they temp with whatever they've got. They don't really know exactly what they want. Sometimes they don't like the instrumentation, but they like the pacing. Sometimes the pacing is off. Sometimes, it's stylistically not quite in the pocket. There's so many different things that one has to consider. And so we basically go through it inch by inch, and really it's my job to listen. If they want me to ask me a question, sure, I've got an opinion. I usually pre-spot before I go into those meetings. So I ask for it ahead of time, watch it, and all the notes are being compiled, so that I know exactly every in, every out. And we also discuss source music, which is not my area. It's a meeting of, in television, it's again producers. It's the picture editor, myself, a music editor, and so that's the discussion is amongst all of us. In film, it's generally the director and producers, again, picture editors running the session, and giving all the numbers, all the time code numbers to the music editor so that he can compile, or she can compile all of that. So I know how many minutes, how many cues, and what's expected of each thing, and what are we trying to achieve with each scene. Sometimes you don't necessarily want to go the obvious route with something. Tarantino is a master of doing this. So he doesn't even really work with composers. He really scores with source music. He licenses music and cuts it in as he wants to. But he does something really clever with that, because he often will run something completely against what you're watching, something hideously violent, and the music is lush and beautiful and sweet, or just completely anachronistic, or it could be whatever. But he's so creative in the way that he uses music. So yeah, I digress.
It's like a dichotomy a little bit, isn't it? Or just the opposites when he uses that. It's kind of juxtaposition, I guess, maybe, or a little very, very contrasting. So I think that's a wonderful way. In fact, I think you answered my next question, because I was going to ask you, what is the difference between, well, you might have answered a little bit, because you took us into the creative process, the Angel. Thank you for doing that. And I wanted to say your bio and resume are so impressive, and you've done amazing films, Boiler Room, Gridlocked, and the UK cult hit Kidulted, which is up on the screen now, the movie poster, as well as the ludicrous narrated documentary, The Heart of the Game by Miramax. So I wanted to ask you if you could describe your process, and whether you like film or TV. What's your preference?
Being a little bit of a masochist, I'd have to say that I love television. I just love TV. I love it because I love staying in, like, the same amount of work is required to conceptualize the tone, the vibe, the feel of something. So, it's a lot to figure out what every project needs. But what's beautiful about TV is that you can live in that world. You can get in it and then keep building on that. And I think actors feel like this about, being able to embody a character and just stay in the world with that character for a longer length of time than simply in a film. So for me, I prefer television, but I wanted to put a button on the spotting, because the reason I brought it up, going back to the pilot, is that and I will then come back and answer the other questions, but we were, it was such a high pressure gig to score a pilot and not be able to spot it. it meant that I never was in the room with any of the producers. Ava DuVernay was the only person I had any previous connection to. And just so that you know, when composers are hired to score a pilot, there's no guarantee that if it gets picked up, that you're going with it, unless you have a very long-standing relationship with the person who is going to be the showrunner. And so in this particular instance, Renee Balser, who's a very, very experienced showrunner, comes from years and years and years of show running, like Law and Order, is on the Dick Wolf productions for forever, a real veteran. I was concerned because I never got to meet him until we hit the dub stage.
Oh, wow.
After the fact. And you never know how it's going to go. And also the crazy thing is, well, I'll tell it this way. As soon as I met him, it was so lovely. I mean, it was like, weeks of no sleep, and you're chasing cuts. It's never locked. They're constantly getting notes. They're constantly testing it. They're doing tests with audience, to see how people are reacting to it as they're going along. And so, I'm frazzled and exhausted, and I get to the dub stage, and finally I get to meet everyone. And the first thing that Renee says is, I'm so glad to meet you. I love what you've done, and I really hope we get picked up so we can work together. And it was just such a beautiful moment because, you just don't know. And then they didn't pick it up.
Oh.
So that was not the fun part. But these are the things that happen. But there was no guarantee that even though everybody loved what I did, they were happy with my work, and CBS could have picked it up, and they could have still pulled somebody else in to score it. So it's a really it's a very high pressure gig with no guarantees. So just so I could paint that whole picture for you. But not having a spotting session really put me on an island, and it was just like, oh my God. I mean, I love the fact that Ava had enough confidence to know that I could really deliver that way. And she said it to me. She said, listen, I know you can deliver. That's why I hired you. Just do what you do. You know what I want. It's a procedural, and I scored a procedural for Fox already at that point. So, I mean, I spotted that script.
Amazing. And I'm so glad you got to work with her too, again, because you originally wanted to, and then it wasn't the right timing, and then you got to work with her. So that must have made you happy, don't you think? Yeah.
Oh, it was fantastic. And I love her. And I have so much respect for her. There are a lot of women who talk the talk, but very few of them walk it. And she is by far the most important woman, I believe, in our industry in terms of supporting other women and actually walking it all the way. As soon as she did Queen Sugar, she made it her business to only hire women directors for every single episode. No one has ever done that before.
And so we want to give a special shout out to Ava DuVernay. Isn't that right, the angel?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just feel that she has so much integrity, and it is wonderful that as she has built her power base, she is really bringing women with her, and that is a huge deal. And it's not often the case. And I can say that, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience of seeing other women, like women directors, going out of their way to hire women composers. And it is a big deal because we go back to that 6%. I mean, women are 50% of the population. So 6% as composers is pathetic. This is 2022. This is not like 1901. I mean, we really have not progressed. And I have to say, we are the most marginalized of all the crafts in entertainment. Women as composers. So
this needs to change, don't you think, Paul? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel it's industry culture, because we as actors, especially like people of color and Latino actors, it's the same thing, because a writer can go, well, artistic license, I don't see that character as a Latino, or what, and you're like, okay, fine, yeah, fair enough, it's art, you do you do what you want. So I think yeah, you're right, the industry has been that's just the way things are. And it does have to change. So it's interesting how deep it goes into even the music side of it, the scoring side, which is such an integral part. You can forgive a film that's not shot well, but if the audio is not there, if the and the soundtrack just adds so much to it as well. Yeah. So it's some things can't be glossed over. So but I'm hopefully it's changing, and it's because of people like the Angel that it wasn't easy for you, I'm sure, but maybe somebody came before you that kind of opened that door, and then but by all means you're doing it on your own merit, and it's the same for me. I thank the people that came before me and maybe opened the door a little bit for me to be able to walk through. So thank you for continuing to do that for the next generation of young ladies and women that can then do this, hopefully know that they can come into this field and be successful. So thank you.
Thank you for that. I mean, going back to the Ava story, and the reason I bring this back is because as soon as she hired me, the first thing I thought of was I need to find a woman music editor. They do exist. There's more women music editors probably than composers, believe it or not. But I went out of my way to, I worked with a woman, Lisa Richardson, on Boiler Room, but every time I tried to bring her in on something else, especially for television, she was always on another feature, and she couldn't do both. So, and she couldn't do For Justice with me, which was really tough. So I had to take a chance on someone I didn't know. And my husband is so brilliant. I love him. And we worked, he runs our production company. He runs our record label, and he thoroughly understands what I do and is extremely supportive. And he just said, I will start researching and get a list together, and let's start figuring out. And we didn't have a lot of time, but we did. And I found a phenomenal woman, Sherry Ozeki. And that was what I was starting to say earlier about the Instagram post, where it's a picture of the two of us at the end of like many a sleepless night together in the trenches, getting across the finish line. And she is brilliant, and she's always doing really big projects. And she, her work ethic, so brilliant. I mean, the two of us really work around the clock, and that's what you kind of have to do. And that's the kind of, commitment that you need to have. And you really, especially if you're scoring television, be prepared to have no life for chunks of time. And that's okay by me. I love what I do. There's no complaints, but it isn't for everyone. It's not for the faint of heart. I can tell you that. So
amazing. I love that. Jump in, Paul, whenever you have a question. I have one more that I have actually a couple more that I wanted to ask the Angel. So jump in when you're ready for your questions at any time. Okay, Paul. The Angel, thank you so much for that. And how important is music licensing of pre-existing songs for the film industry? What is its significance for independent artists?
Well, good question. So almost every project licenses some kind of pre-existing recording. I own my own catalog. So for instance, we're kind of kidding around earlier, but I will just show you a piece of vinyl.
Yay!
Oh my goodness.
Look at that.
So this, back in the good old days.
That's you on the cover, right?
Yeah, that's me. This was my debut album. And from this album, actually, there's even a song that was licensed to Boiler Room, right back in the day, Destiny Complete, featuring Mystic. And each of my projects, there's another project that I did with, so this is me too, 60 channels. I'm just showing you this because this double gatefold vinyl.
Look at that.
Packaging. This is what we're not, this is what we're lacking these days. And believe me, the ease of releasing things without having to go through the rigmarole of putting all of this artwork together. But I love the artwork and I love the tangible, something that I can hold in my hand. And I still have my turntables. I've DJ'd, I've done all of that. And I still to this day love to break out the vinyl. So we're talking about licensing. And so licensing comes from things like these records, like even CDs. Which is, this was the last 60 Channels album that I released called Covert Movements. And so from this album, there's a song called Black Rush that features an Australian vocalist called Angie Hart. And she was in a band called Frente. And Angie is another just brilliant, beautiful artist. And when Glenn Mazzara was show running and he had created an adapted Crash for television, he licensed Black Rush as an end title for one of the very dramatic episodes. And so that was a really nice, especially nice usage of that. So, okay, how important is it for independent artists? It's huge because let's face it, I come from way back in the 90s when, streaming was not even a dream yet. It was before we were able to really do digital recording. We were just on the cusp of that. And so it was just a different time in terms of how you could maybe you could sell records. Okay. If you could get enough exposure, you could do college radio tours. You could, like I did, you'd gig, and you would hopefully get enough exposure that maybe somebody might, discover one of your tracks and want it for their project. And but in this day and age, sales are just totally cannibalized by streams, and the streaming is paying next to nothing. So artists really cannot survive on their record sales. Unless they are mega stars, and they want to go that pop route and have a major label put an absolute ton of money behind them. If that's not your thing and you're an independent artist, then to be able to license your music to film and television is a tremendous bonus. And especially because we have technology like Shazam. So now when you're watching your favorite show or your favorite film and you're like, oh, what's that song? You don't have to wonder. You just get your phone out, open up your Shazam app, and bingo, you know what it is. And if you love it enough, maybe you'll even buy it, or you'll certainly add it to your Spotify playlist, or you'll do something, you'll at least be aware of that artist and maybe investigate more about what they do. It's a really important way for, I think, discovery of music. So it's that, and it's also some money. And so I think it's vitally important to independent artists. And yeah, it's an important, very important thing.
So we need to support the independent artists with that. And I want to thank you for showing those beautiful, can you lift them up one more time? Because I can't get enough of that. I'm that age as well, where I love the vinyl and I love the tactile, being able to hold something. Look how gorgeous that is of the angel. Yes, I love that picture. And it's just so beautiful, isn't it, Paul?
It certainly is. I wish I knew what those things were, but I'm so young, I have no idea what that is.
I'm kidding. Paul, that was a low blow.
No, that's
absolutely 100% kidding.
I know, it's very sweet.
Collecting 45s, and of course 8-track tapes. I remember all that, and but you're right. There's just something so tactile about vinyl, but the packaging that it came in with and the artwork. Even like Cheech and Chong, I was into comedy, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
And it had like a giant rolling paper, which I didn't even know what that was. I was a kid.
Of course.
But to include things like that, and I'm sure there are people that collect vinyl and know about the history would probably be able to tell me 100 times other, projects that came with maps or, inserts that are art, they're artwork. So
Yeah, and
it is
personal
sorely missed.
absolutely, like personal messages from the band. I mean, like what we would do is, and on all of my records, I had I had them actually like carve in a little message on the vinyl. There's certain things that you can do that are just so special that you lose it when it's just a digital file. And honestly, a digital audio file just feels like another bloody file on your laptop, on your desktop, on your phone. It's something that is so, and this has really helped to devalue music. I hate to say it, and believe me, I'm all about the technology. I am such a tech head. I never shy away from it, but I think it's really hurt the value of music because it just feels like another little something that you just drag and drop on your computer. And so it doesn't have this either, like even this little, okay.
Yes, got it.
But you could, there could be a book in there. You take it out and you're reading, what were they called? Liner notes? Is that what they were? Like you take it out and there's lyrics and you're like, whoa, there, here's all the amazing.
I mean, like all of that stuff is in here. I forget if we actually did a booklet. I don't think we did a booklet, but we did this 3-panel. And, every inch of it is beautifully designed by a phenomenal designer, creative art director called Todd Galapo, who I absolutely love. He's a very dear old friend at this point, but he's designed and all of the packaging for my records over all these years. And it's a process, and it's such a creative extra something. And I think that, the music lovers get so much out of it when they can kind of, like, it gives you something to discover beyond just the music,
Yes. I used to look forward to finding out what was, like you said, the Angel's special messages. And, I even loved the smell of, remember the smell of a brand new, vinyl record. Oh my gosh. And just, the packaging and everything. I loved all of it. So we know a different time. That's why I want the younger people who watch this, I hope they do, that they can see that there's another side as well. There's even more creative and artistic side to the music industry and distribution on that. So I did want to ask another question. You are such a great supporter of women in the entertainment industry, the Angel. Thank you for doing that for all of us and representing us so well. We love you. And I would like to, could you please share with us why this is so important to your heart, and what can we do as women to come together to encourage your philosophy?
Well, we kind of touched upon it a little bit before, but I think it's just taking that little extra bit of time to go out of your way to look for women that you can uplift. When I can hire women instead of men, and it's not because I love men. I've got no problem with men. I've mostly been hired by men. I work extremely well with men. So this is not an anti-man statement whatsoever. But because if women don't take that, that step and really put themselves out to give other women opportunities at every juncture, who's going to do it? If we can't do that for each other, we can't expect the men to just step aside and just, and go out of their way to do it for us. So I would just encourage every woman, and especially women directors. And I can't tell you, I will just say this. My husband talks to a lot of different, productions about me and about what we do. And he's come across a lot of that sort of like, yeah, whatever. and he's just like, oh my God, I just spoke to like 4 different women-owned production companies, and I can't believe the lack of interest. And I'm a veteran. It's not like I'm coming out of nowhere. So I can't even imagine an up and coming woman, how are they going to get any opportunities, unless we do what Ava has done and put ourselves out to really make it our business to help. And this is why every year I score several, short films, mostly for women and people of color, to support them and mentor and do everything I can to give back, to pay forward. This year I did toward the end of last year. When did I do it? For Craig T. Williams, who produced a short film called The Mechanics Rose. And Craig, again, who we love from Clubhouse, he approached me, and he and his director who wrote the story, and it was a very personal story. I was really happy to do that for them. Lydia Karatko, who is the director of a film called Bombs Bursting in Air. She is so talented as an up and coming director. Every year I'm writing letters of recommendation for her to get into directors' workshops with all the major studios. She's got so much damn potential. Someone needs to give her a shot.
Yeah.
She's proven it. She just did something with women in media, produced a short film that I didn't have anything to do with, but I did try to help her find a composer for it, called Noor. And, she really knows what she's doing. So I'm putting this out there. Anyone listening, go find some of these women. They do exist. Other women composers. We're not interchangeable. Every single one of us, like every actor, like every other, like every producer, like every director, brings something unique and special to the table. It's not like this umbrella of like, oh, just find any woman or just find any person of color. Go do your homework. I produce as well. I spend the time trying to find people that are a great creative fit for a project. That's important to me. It's not about like name value. It's not about like, believe me, there's plenty of people with an incredible resume and you would never want to spend 10 minutes with them, really working with them. So, my advice is always look for good people, look for people who are really committed to the work, no matter how big or small the project, that they're there for the right reasons, that they care about you, your project, and they're going to really be there for you. And so all of these things, are about how do we do better? We can all do better, no question. And there's no excuse not to. How has anyone ever been discovered? How has anyone ever gotten in the door? It's not all nepotism in our industry, although there's plenty of that too. But, sometimes you just have to like go out of your way and do some research and ask the questions and find good people that they're out there. So, I didn't want to not, because we changed the photo and we didn't talk about kidulthood and Gaia. I just wanted just for reference so that what are they about? Well, funny, I should ask myself.
The Angel, could you talk a little bit about kidulthood and Gaia, please? Sure,
glad you asked. Well, kidulthood wound up being a big cult hit in the UK. An independent project. I was hired by Menaj Huda, who I've done 4 projects with to date, including the most recent one, which was a Lifetime movie called Neighbor in the Window. And he and I have had a blast working together. He is brilliant. That film really struck a chord with the youth of the UK. We knew it had a lot of potential, but we had no idea how, like, it just was on fire because of the authenticity of it, and it just felt real. And it's about a group of 15-year-olds, and it's heavy. It's not a pretty look at what do 15-year-olds get up to in the UK. You don't want to necessarily know, but you're going to find out if you watch this film. So, again, with that film, Menage really wanted me to also do what I did with Boiler Room. With this film, it's very music driven, a lot of UK hip hop and grime, and he wanted the score to also fit into that world. And so I did some really unusual cues for this film. And on the opposite end of the spectrum is Gaia, which was an independent film that went to TIFF in 2009. It's an art house film. And unfortunately, you know, that was like the height of the financial crisis. So that was not an easy sell that year, but you can see from all those laurels. I mean, the reason I bring it up for two reasons. Number one, I'm going to be releasing the score from this film in May. And it's the polar opposite from Kidulthood, Boiler Room, and a lot of other things I've done that are hip and cool. There's no hip and cool factor. This is set in the Arizona desert. The director did something I've never seen done before, and I really have an enormous amount of respect for Jason Lahell, who's the writer-director. He basically had a story in his head. He didn't write the script. He could have, but he didn't. He cast two actors from LA, got in his car with them, drove to the Arizona desert. He found a group of Native Americans, and he asked them if they would be willing to be part of the film, to act in the film, non-actors. He also was looking for locations, and one of them actually gave him the permission to shoot in his home. It's a heavy story, and it's very emotional, and it packs such a huge punch. And this is with like minimal dialogue, almost none. It's like a 2+ hour film that absolutely delivers better than so many fully scripted films that I've seen. So it's something I'm very proud of, and I love this film, and it will get its distribution. It will get its day in the sun. Because it was such a long time ago, and those festival licenses for the music are now expired. It will be a fairly expensive job for the director to re-clear a lot of the songs that he put in there in amongst the score. So he's working on that, and it's just, yeah, it's something very special. So you know, and again, it you know, people always kind of get the idea like, oh, you do that. Well, I can tell you almost no two things I've done sound alike. I am very eclectic. I you know, that's how I listen to music too. I love so many different types of music. And it's really all about what fits, you know, like this is a really organic world that we're in the desert. And we also go into with teepee and a whole ritual that is almost never seen in any film or television show. So it's, yeah, I mean, it just required something completely different. It's very organic, some upright guitar, you know, acoustic guitar, strings, piano, just, you know, and some atmospherics, but it's really lovely, and it's very, very different. So
sounds amazing. Thank you so much for that, The Angel. And thank you, Paul, for introducing the beautiful posters that we have here on the second screen. And they were wonderful. So thank you for that, Paul. Over to you.
Yeah, no, 100%. Thank you. Thank you for being so forthright with those answers, and great questions, AJ. So thank you, because you know, I think a lot of it is knowledge. It's you know, sometimes, and I think you kind of touched on this, The Angel, where if we don't have to change, why change? You know, the industry is what it is, and yeah, I'm comfortable. Why change? So I think it takes dialogue like this, which is probably long overdue. And if just one person listens to this and they're like, oh yeah, you know what, that's what I can do. Because sometimes we don't know what we can do. You know, sometimes sure, when you know, if I don't get offered the opportunity to donate to a charity, I'm not saying this is charity, so maybe it's a bad example, but you know, I thank people. I'm like, oh, well, thank you for giving me the opportunity, because I didn't even know about this. Yeah. So, you know, I think a lot of times it's just the lack of awareness and that, well, that's just the way it is. But then you hear conversations like this, you're like, well, you know what? Let me be more proactive. Let me not just sit back and wait for things to happen. You know, if that's what needs to be done, then let me be part of the solution and not continue to be part of the problem. Absolutely. So I think that's wonderful. And so I have, and I hope these are not silly questions, but it just shows my lack of knowledge of the music business. What's that instrument behind you that looks like a giant, is that a cello or a stand-up bass? Or
it's a stand-up bass. It's an upright. Yeah.
There you go. I guess I do know.
Not silly at all.
Is it true? And I heard a musician call it the dog, because he goes, "Oh, you play the dog, huh?" Is that an industry term, or did he just make that up?
I don't know. I haven't heard the dog about
the dog. That. Okay, all right.
People...
I know it's a stand-up bass, and the other guy's like, "Oh, I see you play the dog," and I was like, "Oh, is that a thing?" Okay, all right. And then, how did, if you want to share this, and how did you get the name The Angel? And are you related to The Edge? No, I'm kidding. How did you get the name The Angel?
No, I'm related to The Rock.
Yeah, or The Rock. Are you related to that? Thank you. I forgot about The Rock.
Okay, so the name The Angel. Angel is my name. I signed that deal with Delicious Vinyl way back in the day. And then it was like, okay, well, what name are you going to use? Well, I use Angel in the initial C as my writer name. So for all of my publishing, everything's written by Angel C. And they're like, well, you know, you got to have like a name that sort of, you know, separates you from like all these rappers. And like, and I was working in you know, in the world in which it was all underground, down tempo, hip hop, trip hop, you know, I was like one of the pioneers of trip hop. So, you know, they're like, look, we need to, I think we need to do something about the name. I'm like, okay, well, what do you suggest? So all of these goofy names came back, and I cannot
like what? Like what?
Okay, here's a good one. So there was a band that they had signed before I ever met them. And we're talking about Mike Ross, who's the owner of the company. So Mike was like, yeah, we used to have, I think they were called Cooley's Funk Box or something. They're like, what about Angel's Funk Box? And we were just like, okay, that's not so cool.
No. I'm slightly offended, and I'm vulgar, you know.
Right. So, okay. So that wasn't going to work. And so like, that was the one that sticks in my mind from like almost 30 years ago. Other goofy names went back and forth, and we were just like, and then one day it was getting like, okay, I'm about to, and I'm still in London making this album because I was living in London those years. And the only reason I'm in LA is because I signed this deal, and then I had to come here to start promoting this record. And so as it's getting to the end and I'm about to get on a plane and come here, and we really need to start marketing, he was like, well, I don't know, what about The Angel? And I was like, you know what? As long as people don't think that there's anything kind of pretentious about it, because I'm so not that, I'm very down to earth and
yes,
not my vibe. I'm like, if it'll end the conversation, let's do it. So that's what happened. And then it became my brand, because the crazy thing is we released one single and did a video for it. And then they lost their distribution through Atlantic. And it was right as the Far Side were having hits. And, you know, I mean, this was a great label with really, really cool artists, you know, Young MC and Tone Loc and I'm trying to think, and Master Ace. And the bottom line is it was a really cool label and cool people, you know, really, really good vibe there. But they had a problem. They couldn't get the record out. They didn't have major distribution to do it with anymore. And so it kind of fell apart. Like, I have a finished album, and so this album has been sitting in the vaults at Delicious since 1992. And I have to say, and this is a big thank you to Mike Ross, that this year he gave me my master's back. Yes.
Yay. Thank you so much, Mr. Ross.
Yes.
Well, let's get it out there, right?
Well, this is it. So I'll be posting something on IG. I've got like the picture, like they send a picture of my 2-inch masters. You know, this was all recorded analog. This is pre-digital. And yeah, so, you know, over the coming months, we're going to figure out what to do. I'm kind of just thinking, I don't want to dare, if I start opening it up and tweaking, I'll never get it out. So I'm just going to, exactly as I've done it, that's how it's going to come out eventually. There are samples in some of these tracks, so I'm going to have to go back in and see, okay, what do I need to clear, and how expensive is that going to be? That's the only kind of prohibitive part of it. With Spirit of Love, you know, there's Cool in the Gang samples, but that was all cleared, all paid for. But yeah, it's this time capsule that that the Angel, and this album that was called A Message from the Angel, is finally, that message is going to finally get out.
Wow, I am so excited.
So exciting, man. So you'd hate to say, well, you know, everything happens for a reason and whatnot, but maybe right now is that time that message needs to be heard. And I love that you said time capsule, because that's exactly what I was thinking, that it's this time capsule, you know, 30 years in the making.
Yeah.
And, you know, through no fault of anyone's, it's now the time, and maybe the message will hit and resonate a lot more today, right now. Maybe that's what people need to hear. And so if there's anything we can do, you know, to help facilitate that or promote that, and once it's ready, if you want to come back and we can talk about it, because I would love to do a deep dive on that and maybe even analyze the whole album. You're like, oh God, more time with these two. But
no, not at all. Not at all. I mean, you know, it's interesting because I hadn't listened to it in forever. You know, I have it, but I'm like, it's so like, it's so not part of my day-to-day world. And then I listened to everything. Once I knew I was getting everything back, I'm like, what did I do? So I listened to, and every lyric is so much about unifying. And, you know, every message is positive. Everything is about things that are just as relevant today as they were 30 years ago, as they were 30 years before that. You know, it's, and it really sounds like nothing else. I mean, I've always been this anomaly. And that's kind of where it's at. And it's interesting, you know, I think you both must know Tommy Jackson from Clubhouse. He runs First Note Play. And Tommy's such a sweetheart. You know, he's always playing music from people in the rooms. And I just knew he would really dig Spirit of Love, which is the one single that came out on Delicious. And I was like, yeah. And he's always like, send me something. I'm like, oh, okay. And I mean, I have something out that's from, like, you know, in the last couple of years that we actually released during COVID called Words Like Daggers.
Oh, I love that song. Oh, I love that song, Angel. The Angel. Oh my gosh. Have you heard it, Paul? You need to hear that. It's incredible. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. Isn't it, The Angel? I love it.
It's heavy. It's a heavy track. I mean, you know, the title alone kind of says it all. But you know, during COVID, we actually shot a video for it. Mark Pellington directed. God bless him. He really came through for me. You know, he's someone I've known for many, many years, but he's a tremendous film and television director. And you know, for anyone who doesn't know, Mothman Prophecies, Arlington Road. He created something called Buzz for MTV way back in the day. So we go back to the 90s together in the UK. But the video is on YouTube. And so I don't know, maybe you could put the link to the video in the description.
Yes, I will do that. I will definitely do that. And I'm excited. And then that way, Paul, you'll be able to check it out as well. It's an incredible, incredible song. And it's one of my favorites from The Angel. So, you know, I'm so sorry to say we have to start wrapping up the show, but I've enjoyed it so much and I had such a great time. I hope you did too. I'm going to go over to you for final thoughts. Paul, over to you first, final thoughts, and then we'll go to The Angel.
Well, I can't believe that we're coming up on 35 minutes. That's amazing, amazing. Because I wish we could have had a little bit more time. I'm being facetious, of course, but thank you. I thank you for answering all these amazing questions, and I look forward to. I think I don't want to say you've only just begun, but oh my goodness, like I'm so looking forward to your album, and I'm sure it's perfect just the way it is. Don't start messing with it. You know that. It's not like something I have to say, because I know how we are. I think as perfectionists, you're like, ooh, you know what? Let me just, and then you start, and it's like pulling a thread on a sweater, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you completely. Yep.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, thank you, AJ, for allowing me to be your co-host and just getting to know people that we've met on social audio and social media, but now getting one step closer to in real life, which that's what I'm working on. That's my travel show idea, which is to meet people that I've only met on social audio and social media, and get to meet them in real life and do a travel show based around that. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me,
can I come on that?
Of course. I need a co-host. Yeah. Vato.tv. You can find all of my social media there. Nice. And yeah, so thank you, the Angel, for answering all my deep questions, like, is that a bass and how'd you get your name? And all of AJ's well thought out questions. So thank you so much.
Your questions were just as good.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. And I have to give credit to the Angel. She helped me with those questions. She helped fine tune. She's so supportive, always helping. And Angel, you're one of my favorite people. I love you. Your name says it all. And I want to shout out to everyone in the world how beautiful you are. You are the Angel to all of us, so many. And over to you for final thoughts, my love.
You know what? This has just been such a pleasure talking to both of you. And it has been a pleasure to get to know you audio only. And it's amazing how much of a connection we all feel, you know, simply by hearing each other speak for a year on Clubhouse. It's pretty amazing. So it's just really lovely to now put the faces, even though I knew what you looked like, but still, this has just been really nice. So I really appreciate it. The little snippet about Tommy was about Spirit of Love, which is the single, and it's this funky kind of thing that he was super excited about. And so he from time to time, even not in his room, we'd be talking on the stage somewhere, and he'd be like, the Angel is so amazing, check this out, and he just started blasting it.
Yes. Yes, and you are so very much. It's incredible.
Really thank him. He's such an incredible, wonderful spirit, and I just thought I'd add that in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my signature, until next time, and the Angel, I do want to meet you in real life. Until next time, the Angel, we are your forever fan. Isn't that right, Paul?
That's right. I have to find my fans. You sent me 3, and I've misplaced all 3.
And where's your cigar? There you go. Angel's got it. She's got it, just like that.
She's got her seat. Yeah. You know what? I've misplaced your fans, but I've also misplaced my cigars. So
okay,
it's not just you. It's I'm not. Oh, there they are. Okay.
We'll have to talk to the prop department. Okay, thank you so much.
How Angel, the Angel, how can people find you on either social media? So if somebody wants to, reach out or just help support or follow, where can they do that?
On Instagram, I'm theangel.supercrucial, SUPA, super crucial. Every one is different, unfortunately, because someone else got in there with the Angel before I did. Twitter, I think I'm just at supercrucial. I'm also, I have a website that is theangelsoundclash.com. And I'm also on Bandcamp. I'm everywhere. I'm on Apple Music. I'm on Spotify. However, I will say that on Spotify, because since I've been the Angel for God knows how many years, other people have decided to use the name. And so there are the Angels, house music artists. That's not me. Yeah. So, but I, I have a link tree on my IG. I've got a link tree on my Twitter. I'm on Facebook. So yeah, all of the different monikers, the 60 channels moniker, the Angel.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. So thank you for that, Paul. And so everyone out there, follow the original, the Angel.
The OG.
Yes, the OG. And we love you so much. So until next time, thank you again, the Angel. And thank you, Paul. Bye for now. We love you.
Thank you. Thank you. Love you both.